That's right, on 1500, SKORNorth.com, the SKOR North app, streaming live if you want to see our faces at Twitter, Twitch, and Facebook. And joining us right now on SKOR North Live, he is the ESPN NFL Nation reporter for the Washington Football Club, John Keim, our guest on SKOR North Live. John, how are you this afternoon, sir?
Doing well. How are you guys?
Doing well. We started the show off just after you tweeted out that more teams getting involved, or at least inquiring on Trent Williams. You say, will be interesting to see if anything happens. And you go on to say Minnesota was the team to watch, but wonder if the Vikings blew their chance. Why do you wonder if the Vikings blew their chance, John?
Well, I think because more teams certainly got involved, and that's going to make it harder. And I think blowing their chance, maybe I even had a follow tweet like, maybe that's debatable, because if the Vikings don't value him at a certain point, then then teams will just say, okay, then you move on. So if they don't value him at a certain point, then that's fine. I just think that I know there are more teams calling about him, and they had multiple teams will probably be interested. The only team that I've been able to really figure out who was Minnesota. And the Redskins have been quiet. Trent Williams' side has been quiet about it, but that's the one that I've been able to learn. And that's been for a little bit now. So they've already had their dialogue, and clearly whatever they offered wasn't enough. That's what the one thing I'd heard from the Redskins. Nobody's come close. So you can take whatever from there. So if that's the case, then they're either going to have to come up and now have competition, or they're just going to be out. So, and again, it's their right. I mean, I think from the standpoint of both teams, if you're talking about this deal in early March or wherever, if you're the Vikings, you're going to try and say, okay, let's see how willing are they to take whatever. Can you get him at a reduced rate? If you're the Redskins, what are you going to say? We're not taking him we're not giving him away at a reduced rate right now, because let's see what happens in the draft. So that's where we're at right now.
And John, if I'm other teams, I'm saying, you realize the guy has said he's not playing for you. He didn't play last year. He has a history of injuries. Like, how much do you want us to give you? I mean, he's not going to play for Washington. So why is their price so high?
Because he is a really good player. I mean, that's like, if all things were equal, they would want a first round pick. I mean, but they know that value isn't there because of he's going to be 32, and he's going to want he's going to want more money than what he's at 12.5 million this year. So he's going to want more than that. And of course, we all know he didn't play last year, but he is there was nothing wrong with his body. It's not like he was out because he had multiple torn ligaments. It was the issue with his scalp and the head that is supposed to be fine. So there's no issue in terms of that being a wear and tear type season or anything like that. So that's why they want something they keep saying second round value. That's why they want that. Now, if you're another team, it makes sense. If I'm another team, I'm going to say the same thing. Like, well, he's going to cost a lot, and he's going to cost us picks. What are you willing to invest? I do know from the Redskins' perspective that they're going to tell teams, listen, if you value this guy at a certain financial point, how do you not then value him at a certain draft pick as well? So if you're, again, it's kind of a little dance and battle of the semantics, I guess, with this. But if you're, if you're the Vikings, you give up a third round pick for him. Well, is a third round pick going to contribute what Trent Williams might over the next couple of years? Well, probably not. But then you have to weigh it with the cost of the contract. And so there are multiple factors that are involved here. It's never quite that simple, but that's why I think there's going to be somewhat of an impasse. And there was another team that the Redskins had the trade compensation they wanted from, but they couldn't work out a deal with Trent Williams. So there have been some others where it's been kind of the reverse situation. That's why I wonder if maybe they can get something done with someone else, because there was that possibility. But, I know clearly Trent Williams, I think, would probably like to play there. He knows Kirk Cousins. That's a good team. They're not far from, reaching the Super Bowl, for goodness sake. So, I think there's a lot of, and plus they have a lot of picks. So I think if you're the Redskins, you're going to look at all those picks and say, you just got a haul for Stephon Diggs. Give us more. So that's what I say. There's a lot there that you say it would make sense for these sides to do a deal, and I can see why both sides might be sticking to their guns.
Is this a game of chicken, essentially, or a standoff then between teams like the Vikings and whoever else might be interested in Trent Williams, saying what Coller just said? This guy doesn't want to play for you, won't play for you, so just take what we're offering. And the Redskins holding pat, or standing pat and holding strong and saying, no, we're going to get value for this guy by hook or by crook, hell or high water. We're going to get value for this guy. And if that's the case, how far do you think Washington is willing to go in this game of chicken? Are they going to hold Trent Williams hostage for another year?
Not for another year, no. I think to me, it sounds like they're willing to roll the dice to get a higher pick, knowing that it may cost them down the road. Like it may cost them, they may have to, trade them for a lower pick down the road. But if you're looking at if somebody's offering, a 5th round pick and these guys want 2nd round value, well, you're going to probably be willing to roll the dice, and maybe you have to trade them for a 6th round pick in August. But is that a big gamble? You know what I mean? So I think that's part of what's at play here. So I don't think this. I have a hard time believing it gets to that point, because you're right. Like he doesn't want to play here again, but he also wouldn't get paid for a 2nd straight year if he doesn't play this year. I just don't think it's going to get to that point. I think the latest it would go would be into August. My gut tells me that probably something happens this weekend, whether it's right before the draft, during, after, whoever. Like if you're the Vikings and you get through the 1st round, you don't get a tackle there. Maybe then you decide, okay, you know what, let's do this. Or maybe another team decides that, or they're willing to go after the draft and get picks for next year. They are definitely willing for that. I don't know that they really want to go much beyond that, to be honest, because, but having said that, it's not really a distraction now, so they can hold on to them because nobody's around. So, there's not a great deal of urgency that maybe fans think there is. But I do think the urgency comes with the draft. And I also think that that's why the draft is all, the draft always spurs more speculation and more teams getting involved. There's just, unless you're really aggressive before then, it's hard to sometimes get stuff like this done.
John, if I were to give you 100 hypothetical football bucks, what team would you put down your football bucks on Trent Williams playing for next year?
I don't. That one's hard because I don't know all the teams that are really involved. I mean, to be honest, I'm not sure anybody. I know the Browns might have interest if they don't pick one at number 10. If they don't pick one at number 10, I'd put money on them. The Jets, I've wondered about. I've heard multiple things with them as far as yes or no. So, and they have a couple 3rd round picks, and that clearly I think would get the deal done. So, and I think so I don't, Tampa Bay to me makes sense, except that they have a left tackle, Donovan Smith, who costs a lot of money if they cut him. So I don't think they can really throw him inside. So so it kind of makes sense because you have Brady, but then you look at it and it may be hard to fit in. Maybe Miami, if they get through a certain point and they don't have somebody, those would be some of the teams I'd watch. And the other team that I would watch too, this is a big if Joe Staley retires, does San Francisco get involved? And I don't know that, but that would be another one that you'd want to watch. But I think if you're the Niners, you kind of like to know now. And if you don't, then you probably don't do it.
John Keim, our guest here.
So I don't know.
Sorry, go ahead, John.
I don't know. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cut you off, but I don't know who the favorite would really be at this point. I just think that the more that gets in there, I put it on the field more than the Vikings at this point. But listen, it takes one phone call to change a lot of things.
I can't believe, John, you didn't even spend the hypothetical football bucks.
Yeah, it's
hypothetical
not even real money. Just blow it, man. Just throw it up in the air.
Yeah, I think it. The one, like I said, I know the Browns would be a team if they don't find someone at 10. You would have to. That was an organization that went after him last year, and it's a different group, but they have the same need at left tackle. Mm-hmm. But again, they can draft someone there. So if they go through the 1st round without drafting a tackle, then I think you clearly can put your Schrute bucks or whatever you guys gave me on the Browns.
Great pull. Great pull.
John Keim, ESPN NFL Nation reporter, joining us. He covers the Washington Football Club for them. My last question for you, John, has nothing to do with Trent Williams and doesn't involve the Vikings. Are they really considering trading out of number 2? I saw Ron Rivera say that, they listen to offers. Chase Young seems like a no-brainer to me there. All the big boards that I've seen has him as the best player in this draft. Quarterbacks almost always go number 1. They're a hot commodity, but when you look at who is the best player and the most sure thing in this draft, the consensus seems to be Chase Young. Do you think they're really considering moving out of that spot?
Not really. I'd be shocked if it's not Chase Young. I haven't talked to anybody that says that, yes, there's something going on. So, and I know there's some teams that have, that I've heard that have called up, but I don't think that any of the teams that had inquired don't really have the ammo to do it. So like I said, I have yet to talk to anybody who says that, yeah, I think this could really happen. I think it's where you have to file it is in the, well, it only takes one team to do it. I just don't think if it's only one team, I doubt they're going to give up the King's ransom to go up there, but maybe they would. That's the only thing. It's the you never know, and it only takes one team. But as of today, no, it'll be Chase Young.
John, appreciate you joining us last minute with the Vikings tidbit that you tweeted out there. We were interested to talk to you. Thanks a lot, man.
No problem. Thanks for having me on.
There's John Keim joining us from ESPN NFL Nation. He covers the Washington Football Club. What do you take away from that, Coller?
Oh, that his mentions were probably hilarious. That would be one. Now, I mean, he makes a good point that, anything could change on draft night, and I do not count out Trent Williams to the Vikings, but there are teams, it seems, that might be a little more willing to spend or have a little more, maybe not assets, but actual money to spend on Trent Williams for a contract extension. That's something that the Vikings would have a little more trouble doing, even if they structured it to be worth less, even if they moved on from Riley Reif. It's still down the road, puts you in a little bit of a tricky situation for the next few years. But of course, this is the all-in type of plan, so you're trying to win this year. But there might be other teams like Cleveland who says, look, we have the most cap space in the entire NFL right now. Come here, third-round pick, and be the left tackle for Baker Mayfield. That team is in an all-in type of mode with Baker Mayfield on his rookie contract for only a little bit longer, and that's your window to win a lot of times. So stack up that talent, spend that money, sign him to a huge contract, and overpay to get him in there because he's worth it to you, and you have a lot of other positions that are full. And unlike the Vikings that have a lot of other positions that are empty and things down the road that don't get that much easier with their contract situation.
Yeah, the team that keeps on popping up, at least most recently, is the Cleveland Browns. From John and other people who cover that team that I've read reports from, the team that seems to be consistently coming up the most, at least in the last few days, as talks heat up and we get closer to the draft, seems to be the Cleveland Browns and their interest in Trent Williams.
Question for you,
yes,
though.
Sir.
Should the Vikings fans be upset if Trent Williams lands in Cleveland with Kevin Stefanski and it's for a third-round pick and they sign him to an extension that's $16 million a year? Should Vikings fans be upset that you didn't match a third-round pick and that type of extension for Trent Williams?
Again, my philosophy, since I sat in front of a microphone for the very first time in Minnesota, has been that as long as you're invested in Kirk Cousins, push all your chips to the center of the table to win that coming season. Every offseason, that should be your objective. And if Trent Williams is gettable for a third-round pick and you have the cap space to give him the money that he wants to make him happy and go out on a football field and play football, then you should do that. That's my stance. And I think a lot of Vikings fans probably feel that way. And yeah, they'd be pissed off if he's playing in a Browns uniform next year for a third-round pick and a contract extension that they could have afforded, and given the draft capital that they have to spend right now.
That's what it will depend on, is whoever gets Trent Williams, how much they paid to get him, and then how much they paid to keep him.
Yeah, it's not as easy as just trading for him.
Right.
He's going to want a contract extension, and you have to consider that when you talk about the Vikings or anybody else going and getting him. It's not as simple as just trade for Trent Williams, but if you have the cap space or could potentially make the cap space by trading or releasing Riley Reif or whatever other moves, trading Anthony Harris, whatever moves that you could make to free up that cap space and put Trent Williams in a Vikings uniform if it's feasible and it's doable without wrecking your salary cap and without wrecking your chances of doing other things with the other resources that you have, I think it's incumbent on you to do that, unless they're doing what we talked about before, Collar, which is having two plans, having the win now plan, which hinges on Mike Zimmer, or the soft rebuild plan, which happens, that's the default if Mike Zimmer fails as a head coach, for lack of a better term, and now you're doing this with a new head coach in 2021.
Yeah, fails is an interesting one because
fails in terms of the objectives that they would set for him.
Yeah,
is the only way that I mean that.
I wonder what they think those are, though. Like with this present situation, let's say they don't get Trent Williams. I mean, we just heard John Keim say that his money would be on the field and not the Vikings. So, okay, let's say that they don't. And they draft a bunch of players that, at least to our eyes on draft night, look good. All right, you've gotten a good haul of draft picks, but those draft picks don't offer you much in terms of above replacement level play for the first year, but everything looks good going in the second year. Or at least that's what you expect for those rookies to produce. Like, what should be the bar that ownership sets for Zimmer and Spielman? I mean, should they say, well, look, you guys sort of had your window. We got very close. We didn't win. So now we've got to take a step back to take a step forward. That's a very realistic way of looking at it if you're ownership. But there's also probably the ownership that's like, you know what? We could have built some more towers for $84 million. We didn't pay for 9 wins per season and 1 playoff win with Kirk Cousins. So heat is still on. Sorry, guys. It's not our fault that you overpaid players or that you didn't have good drafts in 2016 and 2017 that have set you up to be in a pretty tough position at a lot of spots. Like, that's not our fault. That's what you guys did. We didn't sign Anthony Bard all that money. You guys told us it was a great idea. We gave you the money, and through 1 year, it hasn't looked very good. So the expectation is still to get back to the NFC Championship game. I mean, I could understand that viewpoint of being like, you know, you put yourselves here. So either you get back or we're going to have to make a change and go in a different direction. Or if they say, you know what, 2021 is the right way to go.
I don't think it's ever fair to put when you set a bar for a coach or a GM to clear, I don't feel like it's ever fair to put a hard, I don't know what's the right word that I'm looking, hard limit, I guess, for lack of a better term, on what they need to do. Because if you say Super Bowl or bust, or you say NFC Championship or bust, or you're fired, Rick Spielman, you're fired, Mike Zimmer, if you don't make it to an NFC Championship or a Super Bowl, I don't think that's a fair way to go, because so many things are out of your control over the course of an NFL season and how deep you can get in a playoff run. If I'm an owner and I'm making decisions on hiring and firing people, I just have to look at it and use sort of a subjective scale, but assess it in a way that I say, did I believe this team could win a Super Bowl if everything fell in the right place, if the ball bounced the right way? Did I believe over the course of the 2021 season, or 2020 season, excuse me, that this team was a legitimate Super Bowl contender? Then I think you should keep your job. Now that I know that's a very shady, gray way of assessing things, but I think that's the most fair way to do it. Again, if you say NFC Championship or you're fired, you say Super Bowl or you're fired, that's not necessarily fair to those guys, and I don't think really does a good job of measuring the type of job that they did as a head coach or a GM. Does that make sense to you, Cal?
No, it does. I mean, one game in the playoffs. I mean, if you're New Orleans last year, you went into the playoffs thinking like, we can
what
win
if
the Super Bowl, and then
Saints
you lose.
Ownership went into last year and said, Super Bowl or bust, man. If Sean Payton doesn't make it to the Super Bowl,
then you lose a coin flip.
He's fired.
Right. Yeah. Right. And you lose in overtime.
That doesn't make any sense to approach it that way in my eyes.
Now that's fair, but if you say, well, you know, we've got to make the playoffs and then see what happens. Okay, well, there's going to be 7 playoff teams. So if you're a 6 or 7 seed, you don't have a great chance to go win the Super Bowl, because you're going to have to go on the road the whole way there. And if you're the 7, well, let's see, if you're the 7, even if you win, you're going to have to play the 1 on the road the next week. I mean, it's going to be really, really, really difficult. And I don't see teams that are in the 7 spot outside of maybe an outlier in the next 15 years or something. But it's going to be really, really tough for those teams to win. So if you make